All right, testing. We're recording. All right, part 369 reports of motor carriers. 369-1 annual reports of the hired non-exempt motor carriers, property motor carriers, household goods, dual property carriers. 369-2 classification carriers for hire, non-exempt motor carriers for property, household good carriers, dual property carriers. 369-3 classification carriers for hire, non-exempt motor carriers for passenger. 369-4 annual quarterly reports. Class 1 carriers for passengers 369-5 records. 369-6 addresses. 369-8 request exemption filing. 369-9 request exemption public release. 369-10 public release of motor carrier property data. All right, 369-1 annual reports of hire for the non-exempt of the motor carrier for the property motor carriers, household goods, the dual property carriers. Annual report form M, all class 1, class 2 for the hired non-exempt motor carriers. Properties include household goods, dual property motor carriers. File motor carrier annual report form M. Carriers must file an annual report on or before March 31st, year of the following year to which it relates for classification criteria. 369 to when filing report, carriers must file an annual report. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration address 369-6. You can obtain a copy of the report from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration website. 369-2 classification carriers for hire non-exempt motor carriers, property, household good carriers, dual property carriers. For hire non-exempt motor carriers for property with a group into the three categories. Class 1 carriers having annual carrier operating revenues including intrastate of $10 million or more applying for the revenue deflator formula note A. Class 2 carriers having annual carrier operating revenues including interstate at least $3 million but less than $10 million after the applying of the revenue deflator formula note A. Class 3 carriers having an annual carrier operating revenue including intrastate of less than $3 million for applying of the revenue deflator formula note A. B1. The class in which any of the carrier belong with the determined annual carrier operating revenues exclude the revenue of the private carrier to compensate for the incorporated hauling lacing vehicle of the drivers deprived of the carriers after applying to the revenue deflator formula note A. Upward and downward classification will be effective for the January 1st of the year of the immediately following the third consecutive year of the revenue qualifications. Any carrier which begins with a new operation obtained the operation of the authority not previously held extend with the existing authority obtained with the additional operating rights shall be classified in accordance with the reasonable estimate of the annual carrier operating revenues for applying with the revenue deflator formula shown in note A. The business combination that occurs with the merger organization consolidation surviving carrier shall be reclassified effective January 1st next calendar year of the basis combined revenues of the year combination occurred. After applying with the revenue deflator formula shown in note A, carriers must notify the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration any change in the classification, any change in annual operating revenue that was changed for the cause change the classification. The carrier must request the waiver exemption of these regulations unusual extenuating circumstances where the classification process is unduly burdened for the carrier, such as the purchase, partial liquidation, curtailment, elimination of the contract. Service request must be written with specified the condition justifying the waiver of the exemption. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will notify the carriers any change of the classification. 5 of the carriers not required to file annual report form M may be required to file with the worksheet with the calculating carrier classification. All the carriers will be notified any classification. Then it shows shows current year's annual operating revenues times 1994 average of PPI. Current year average of PPI equals adjusted annual operating revenues. All right, 369-3 classification carriers of the hire non-exempt of the motor carriers of the passenger. For hire of the non-exempt of the motor carrier of the passenger grouped in the following two classes. Class 1, carrier that have average annual gross transportation operating revenues including intrastate over $5 million or more from passenger motor carrier operation after applying for the revenue deflator formula shown in note A. Class 2, carriers having the average annual gross transportation operating revenues including intrastate less than $5 million for passenger motor carrier operating after applying the revenue deflator formula shown in the note. B1, class which any of the carrier belong to the determined annual carrier operating revenues that apply with the revenue deflator formula shown in the note. Upward and downward rate classification will be effective January 1st of the year immediately following the third consecutive year of the requalification. Any of the carrier which begin with a new operation obtained with the operating of the authority that not previously held with the extent of the existing authority that obtains additional operating rights shall be classified in accordance with the reasonable estimate of the annual carrier operating revenues after applying with the revenue deflator formula shown in the note. When the business in combination occurred with the merger, reorganization, consolidation, surviving carrier shall be reclassified effective January 1st next calendar year with the base of the combined revenues for the year with the combination occurred with applying with the revenue deflator formula shown in the note. 4 carriers shall notify the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration change for the classification when the annual operating revenue exceeds Class 2 limited with the writing of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration address 369-6 unusual circumstances where the classification regulation reporting of the requirements unduly burdened for the carrier. The carrier may request from Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration waiver for these regulations, which request shall be in writing. Specifying the condition justifying the waiver of federal motor carrier safety, notifying any change of classification reporting requirements. For the classification purpose, the Federal Motor Carriers Administration shall publish the Federal Register annual index number shall be published adjusting gross annual operating revenue index number for the deflator based on the producer's price index of the finished good and use the eliminating effects of the inflation classification process. All right, to get that, you have your current year's annual operating revenues over the 1986 average PPIs and current year PPI over current year's PPI adjusted annual operating revenues. All right, 369 for annual reports, Class 1 carrier of passengers. Class 1 motor carrier of the passenger shall complete the motor annual report of MP1 for the motor carrier of the passengers form MP1. Accounting period of the motor carrier's annual report form MP1 shall be used to file annual selected motor carrier data. An annual accounting period shall be made based on either the 31st day of each year of the accounting year of the 13 4-week periods each ending inclusive of the last 7 days of each calendar year. A carrier electing to adopt the accounting with a year of the 13 4-week period shall, within the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration statement, show the day on which accounting year will close. The subsequent change of the accounting period may not be made except with the authority of Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. The annual report should be filed before March 31st of the year following the year to which relate the annual report filed with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration with address Statute 369-6 of the copy of the Federal Form MP1 may be obtained with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. 369.5 Records. Books, records carrying operating documents shall be retained and prescribed in Title 49 CFR 379 Preservation of Records. 369.7 The address. The following address must be either the motor carrier submitting a report requesting exemption from filing a report requesting exemption with the public release of a report, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration Office of Registration and Safety Information, 1200 New Jersey, 8 Ave, Southeast Washington, D.C. 205900001. Address may also be used general correspondence regarding the data collection program described in this section. 369.8 Requirements. Request exemption from the filing. Generally, the section governs the request exemption for the filing of the report required in 369.1 criteria of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. May grant or request a proper showing with exemption necessary to preserve confidential business information not otherwise publicly available. The information consolidation confidential when disclosure information carrier reports would be likely to cause substantial harm to the carrier's competitive position. Disclosure information from the report would likely to impair protective government interests. Content of the request exemption from filing must contain the minimum of the contents required for the request for the exemption from public release contained in 369.9c. Carrier's request may include with any other grounds that is why the request is granted. When requests are due for the timing of the request exemption for the filing of the same at the time of the request for the exemption with the public release contained with 369.9d with the annual Form M, both a report with the request for the due March 31st year of the following year to which it relates. All right, decision to grant or deny the request is denied or failed to provide supporting information required in paragraph C of this section. If supporting information is insufficient, established for the information carrier reports meets the criteria paragraph B of the section. At Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, each grants or denies each within a reasonable period of the federal time. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration notify the carrier of the decision. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration shall identify administrative finally pendency with request the pendency for the carrier required to submit with any of the reports required in 369.1. Period exemption. If the request of the exemption under this section granted for the carrier will exempt from the reporting requirements of the 369.1 period of 3 reporting years. H. Modification decision to grant the request. The request is granted. It remains in effect within accordance with its terms unless modified to a later finding that the decision was clearly erroneous and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration believes such findings should made with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will notify the requesting carrier writing with the reasons for the modification. The carrier must make the reconsideration modification. All right, 369.9 Request exemption from public release. General, the section covers the request exemption for the public release for the report required in Internal 369.1. Require general criteria. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will grant requests for the proper showing of the carrier that is not publicly held with the corporation, that the carrier is not subject to financial report requirements of the Security and Exchange Commission, that the exemption is necessary to avoid competition or to avoid disclosure information qualified for the trade secret privilege confidential information under Title 5 U.S. Standard Code 552B4. Information is considered to be confidential. Disclosure information carrier's report would likely to be cause substantial harm to the carrier's competitive position. Disclosure information for the report would be likely to impair protectable government interests. Contents of the request of exemption public release must contain the information supporting the claim. The supporting information must contain the opinion of the request must consider the objective data with the existing extent possible, the general non-specific aspirations analysis with insufficient support to the request. If the FMCA Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is able to define the criteria area the met, supporting information must show the information claimed the confidential, trade secret, commercial, financial information privilege and confidential. Make sure that taking the carrier to ensure the information has not been disclosed otherwise made available to any person, any company, or organization other than the carrier. Insofar as known to the carrier extent with the information that disclosed will otherwise become available to the person other than the carrier with which there is such disclosure available that does not compromise the confidential nature of the information. If the carrier asserts the disclosure would likely result in substantial competitive harm, with the harmful effect of the disclosure would be the effects should be viewed as substantial, the causal relationship between the effect of the disclosure. If the carrier asserts the disclosure would be likely to impair the protectable pro-government interest, what effect of the disclosure are likely to be, and why the disclosure is likely to impair such interest. When requests are due, request for the exemption under the section made for the time during the year, however, the request will be deemed applicable only with the reports due on after the day of the request received. The request received after the report's due date only will be considered for the following year's report. The request will be deemed received on the day of the request. Physically received, if sent by mail on the day of the postmarked Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will only allow late requests if there is extenuating circumstances. The carrier gives the adequate notice within a reasonable time of the extenuating circumstances. Decision for the granting denying request after due date of each of the annual report specified in the 369-1 Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will publish to no Federal Register requesting comments if the requests received under this section are valid or pending. Request was granted only if they provide the supporting information required in paragraph C of this section with the supporting information sufficient and established for the information criteria and the carrier's report meets the criteria in paragraph B of this section. If the carrier fails to comply with the timing requirements of paragraph D of this section, the claim of the confidential will be waived unless the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration notify the extenuating circumstances for the information disclosed to the public. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration finds the extenuating circumstances warrant consideration of the claim. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will grant and deny each of the requests no later than 90 days after the request due date defined in paragraph D of the section decision. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration administrator the final of the annual form M of the report request to be due the March 31st due the decision due on June 30th. If the request is granted, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will notify the carrier of the decision and appropriate limitations. If the request is confidential, deny the Federal Motor Carrier Administration notify the carrier of the decision that the information will be made available to the public not less than 10 working days after the carrier has received notice of the denial. Notice with specific reason for the denial of the request. Pendency the request is deemed the pending of the date that it is received the Federal Motor Carrier Safety until granted denied by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Federal Motor Carrier Administration will not release publicly unless otherwise required by law any report which are valid requests for the exemption of public release is pending. Prior period exemption of the request for the exemption under this section granted Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration public release reports covered in the granting of the exemption unless otherwise required by law with a period of 3 years for the report's due date. H. Modification decision granting request the request granted with remains in accordance with the terms unless modified by later finding of the decision clearly erring as Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration believe the finding should be made. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration over the request and carrier in writing with a recent modification that the carrier's report will be made available to the public in not less than 10 working days from the day of the receipt of notice under the paragraph. The carrier may seek reconsideration modification. Alright, 36010, public release of the motor carrier property data. In general, unless otherwise provided in the section of the data contained in the report filed under 369.1 shall be made publicly available to no sooner than the due date of the report. Exemption relating to exemption from the public release. One, if the requested exemption from the public release pending with the 369.9 Federal Motor Carrier Safety will not publicly read the reports covered with the request until the least time that the decision grant is requested. If made, if the carrier granted with exemption public release 369 Federal Motor Carrier Safety public release, the reports covered with the grant exemption period of 3 years for the report's due date. Other exemptions notwithstanding any of the provision of the report information must be released. If the data are included with aggregated industry statistics that do not identify the individual carrier, the other components of the Department of Transportation for their internal use only, if required by law, with consistent with the carrier filing reports and contractors necessary for the performance contract of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration.